Hey everyone, welcome to Three Mystics at a Round Table. So delighted to be back with Gary and Sally. We missed last month due to illnesses and, just a lot of things going on. So I'm happy to be back. Today's topic is going to be on miracles. Now, I don't know that I'm what do you call, professional at knowing about miracles. So that's why I thought maybe we would just have a little discussion and see what we flush out from spirit about miracles. Most of us think that in our mindset, miracles are about healing the body. And, when someone's sick and we pray for a miracle for them, but we often don't ask for miracles in our everyday lives. We think it's about one thing but perhaps there's a lot more to it. And so I thought it would be fun to have such a discussion about what each of us thinks miracles are, and then how they've changed our lives if we've had a miracle, if that makes sense. So who would like to dig in first?
Well,
Let's define it. Let's
I'll
define
make
what
a
a miracle is. Yeah.
I'll make a comment or two because Spirit gave me some information this morning. Even amidst the very busy morning I had, there was stuff coming through, and I'm just like, oh, okay. So here's what they gave me. Um, Miracles are what we call miracles take place when we're in alignment with natural law. And they're not really miracles. They're the natural state that we should be in. We call them miracles because, from our 3D linear perspective and out of alignment with natural law, they seem miraculous. But really, that's the way the universe is supposed to work. So I wanted to put that in. Spirit gave me that. And does that make sense?
Oh, I love that.
Perfect,
Go ahead,
perfect
Sally.
sense.
Yeah. Go
Yeah.
ahead, Sally.
Well, I'm essentially in agreement, and the way that when I was thinking about this topic earlier this morning myself, I think about, people who we think of as having performed miracles, like Jesus and, Buddha and, other icons, I guess is the right word, through history that have had spiritual mastery. And what they knew is that what we think of as this physical 3D world is the illusion, right? And so they were basically working beyond the illusion, right? And you're right, it is natural law. It's not magic. It's not miraculous. It's not something outside of what is real. And so it's just a matter of perspective. And those masters had a deeper, broader perspective of what reality is, and therefore were able to work outside of what we think of as our normal 3D world experience. And they said, you can do everything I do and more,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's a
And
matter of shifting our
manifestation,
perspective.
manifestation works on that exact same principle.
Yeah.
Is when you're in alignment, in resonance with natural law, then everything is already available. There's nothing you're creating. It's already available. So that works on the same principle, I would say.
Right. So we've often, those of us that grew up, reading the Bible, we followed Jesus, and not only did he heal the sick, but he turned the water into wine. He multiplied the loaves and the fishes for the crowds. So miracles aren't necessarily, in my opinion, just about physical healing. Yet that seems to be where a lot of people turn to ask for a miracle when someone's really sick or has cancer, and they ask for a miracle. And I always say sometimes the miracle is that they leave, not
Mhm.
that they stay, not that their body is healed, but that they leave. I think it's a course in miracles, and I think Gary, you would know this, is that a miracle is nothing more than a change in perspective. And so,
Exactly what I was saying. Yeah.
Yeah. When Sally, when you mentioned about they had a different perspective and they were in alignment, and which brings to the question is then how do we get into alignment? What is alignment? Now, for me, I think it's about really inviting spirit to clear our distortions, what is not in alignment with natural law within ourselves, understanding our own divinity, but really going through this process of even clearing a distortion or unreleased emotion or healing a wound is a miracle.
Yeah.
What I've found, because oftentimes in my inner world, when I meditate, all I get is great miracles are going to happen. And I'll go, well, what are the great miracles? And usually it is something that comes in and helps me release where I am not in alignment in my own and what distortions I'm holding or what pain I'm still holding or what wound I'm still holding, and being able to work with that and release it out of my body so that I can be in alignment. Go ahead, Gary.
Um, I mean, a miracle is that we are on a globe, a ball, spinning through space, walking around. We take that for granted because it's always been in our awareness. But that's kind of a miracle in itself. The fact that we're on this ball spinning through space, living a supposed life. Um, I mean, there's a lot of things that could be called miraculous, but they're only miraculous when compared with an old paradigm of viewing life and the world.
What do you think it would be a disconnection with? Trying to think a turn up with your own higher self, with the spirit world, with the divinity itself. When you don't have that connection, I think you would have to have that connection
Yes.
at some level, even if it's a simple thought or opening the door, is something out there that could help me. And I think there's been a lot of stories like on the internet of near-death experiences where maybe they've been in a dark place and they call out to that higher, whether it's Jesus or whatever, and it pulls them out of that. So, which makes me think, okay, so then where does the asking fit in for the miracle? Because what I have found is that usually if something takes place, it's usually not what I think it is. And it happens when I'm not thinking about it. So I threw a lot out there, but what are your thoughts about, okay, is it okay to ask?
Yes. Yes. I think it is okay to ask. I think it's even important to ask, perhaps, although not always. I mean, there are people who don't have a belief system who might experience a miracle, but at the soul level, did they have a desire to have that experience? And that's a harder thing for us to know because we're not always necessarily, at least mentally, connected to our soul selves, right? Our higher selves that have a deeper understanding of what we're here to experience in this physical reality. So, I think it can go 100 different ways, a million different ways. Sometimes I think we can create it for ourselves. Sometimes I think it's gifted to us. And it may have been part of our life plan all along to create a shift in this experience.
Oh, I'm getting this, so I'm just going to put it out that ask and then allow. Don't try and force it, but allow it and live as if what's been asked for has already transpired.
Mm, very good.
Yeah. And that's that manifestation, right?
So,
Yeah.
well, that's true. Maybe miracles are manifested just on
Well, they
some
are.
level um, in our lives. I mean, I consider my whole spiritual journey a manifestation of having asked, having let go of one belief system and inviting that unknown to come into my life and teach me what truth is.
Mhm.
And then that's when the dreams, the mystical experiences, and things started happening because I had a shift in perception. I had said, this isn't working. I don't know what works. So I'm going to leave it up to or trust there's something out there that can lead me in the way that I need to go. So I think the asking is important, but I also think, like you said at the beginning, it should be a natural function of life, of natural law, that we eventually get to that place where it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense why that happened. And it's not, oh my God, a miracle happened, but it was like, yeah, I could see that. I could see why that happened. Did that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just
And
like with telepathy. I mean, we would call that miraculous,
Mhm.
but really that might be our natural state that we're just not tuned into. Um, though apparently autistic children are, if you listen to telepathy tapes, um, and some regular members of society have tapped into that as well. When I say regular members, I mean fully functioning members of society. Um, so we label a lot of things miraculous that I think are quite natural, but we've just got blinders on.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. Were you going to say something, Sally?
no, I was just going to say it's all about the semantics, right? We
Mhm.
call something miraculous because we think it should have been impossible to occur in whatever way that it did, because it doesn't fit sort of our worldview or our paradigm that we have, had ingrained in us as we've grown up. But in reality, miraculous, impossible things happen all the time. So clearly, they're not impossible,
Right.
right? If it's like the white crow, you know, all you need to do to prove that not all crows are black is to have see one white crow, and then no longer are all crows black.
Right.
Mhm.
But that's the way we are with miracles, right? We think that things are impossible or couldn't or shouldn't occur, and then when they do occur, we have to wrap a word around it to say this was impossible, but
So, how can we help people who are looking for a miracle? Um, going back to my story of, sitting down on the couch and letting go of one perspective and inviting in a new perspective, asking, I think, is important.
Yes.
Asking for a shift. I know for me, like when I'm feeling sort of out of sorts in my emotions, I ask for cleansing. Okay, what am I holding on to? What needs to be changed? What needs to shift in me? And most people are looking for the outer miracle, but I think the inner miracle is so important. So maybe let's talk about the inner miracle of the shift in perception
Well,
that
I,
allows it to happen.
I would add something to that. What you said, asking, but then having gratitude that the outcome has already transpired.
Mm,
Now, that's a leap for a lot of people because they're going to say, well, it's not my reality. Well, no, and you're making it not be your reality by saying that. So ask, put it out there, and then express gratitude that this has transpired, not it's coming, not it's in some future time now.
yeah. And I would say also, though, release your expectation of what you think it will be,
Hmm.
because how many times does, say, a desperate parent of a sick child say, you know, just save my child, just take my life instead of theirs, whatever, because they're so desperate for the miracle of what they insist must be. And maybe that child came in, and I mean, this is a hard and heavy topic, but maybe that child came in to have a shorter life. It did what it needed to do in this incarnation, which was maybe to interact with the parents, to create a shift for the parents, we often think that we know what it must be.
Mhm.
And we need to let go of that as well. Because like I said, sometimes the miracle is the release from illness, and not into living physical health, but perhaps into dropping the body. So having that broader perspective of we are eternal spiritual beings makes our wants and needs of this life minor by comparison to eternities.
Mm-hmm.
So I think certainly we can ask, and certainly we can be open to receive even what we want, right? We also need to be open to receive what we didn't know was actually best for us.
Well, sometimes it too, I think, and that's perfect, Sally. Sometimes I think that even just asking for peace in a situation. And so let's go back to the story of, a child who is sick. And I can imagine the anxiety of the parents and what they're going through. And, focused on healing the body. And sometimes we just need to ask for peace, because I think the peace will get us back into alignment with the natural law of whatever is to happen is okay. Yeah. And so oftentimes when I'm out of peace, I will ask for peace, especially when it comes to situations that I can't control. Please bring me to peace about this. Give me a different perspective so that I can allow whatever the situation. And it's the same thing with, a lot of things that are happening in the world that a lot of people, we don't like what's happening. And we can get caught up in them, which brings us down into those lower feelings and emotions and anger and frustration and that kind of thing. And what the world really needs right now is peace. Individual people finding peace instead of fighting everything, bringing it into the inner world to say, just bring me to peace about what's happening in the world. And I don't know if that's something you do, but that's often what I do. And the miracle is just, okay, I can let that go. I can see that in a different perspective. I'm not holding on to this belief. I can let it go. And that works really well for me. So there is an asking there, bring me to peace about this, because I can't control it.
Yeah. I keep going back to the monks that are walking from Texas to DC, and they are peace in action, right? And so I just resonate with their decision to walk for peace, this long distance, despite, whatever hardship it has been for them, because they are changing the world as they walk, right? And they're not being pushy. They're not asking for notoriety or publicity. They're just being peace and then taking an action in support of peace. And that for me, just it resonates with me like a bell, that's something to emulate.
And we have to have that peace in ourselves. I think you touched on this, Susan, that we can't see it in the outer world unless we have it within ourselves. So trying to just change what's going on out there is a futile effort, because we have to change what's going on within us first.
Agree 100%. So this leads me to the question of, can you share what you would consider to be a miracle that has happened in your life.
I mean, there's so many things because I think I just don't use the term miracle anymore. Only because I've had so many astonishing, amazing things occur now throughout the course of my life that I have to accept them as all having been possible to begin with. So, for example, just a really small one, the first EVP that I received just spontaneously, an EVP is electronic voice phenomena for anybody who's not familiar. The first EVP that showed up for me that I know is from my son on the other side is like a miracle, right? We Most people do not believe that the disembodied can communicate with us in a physical way. And yet I have this recorded physical communication. And the conditions were such that it couldn't have been it's not my imagination, and it couldn't have happened through any logical describable way that a skeptic would say, oh, it must have been this, that, or the other, right? And so we can call that a miracle, and it certainly was like a gift to me that I still cherish and still go back to on a somewhat regular basis just to listen to. But these things happen, and they happen all the time to a lot of people. And you can call it a miracle. There's nothing wrong with that. But it is just reality.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think people who have lost children and then they have an experience, like Gary, your experience with that young woman who passed away, and they come in and you see that, they have this experience, they would consider that a miracle because they've wanted contact. Which leads me then to the question, because there are those that haven't had contact and they want it so bad. And why would, and this might be a hard question, why would some people receive the miracle and others not?
Because some people are meant to be here for a specified time. And I thoroughly believe that the time of our leaving here is set, not necessarily the how, but the when. And if you're supposed to be here, the universe will work to help you maintain that. I would use as an example my house fire a year ago, January 4th. You have about a minute and a half to get out of one of those houses when they catch on fire. I was in a deep, sound sleep. Not only was spirit working, and I'm quite certain of this, but they utilized my dog to awaken me. And he actually sacrificed himself. But I had a retired insurance guy look at my house and go, people don't usually get out of those. But it wasn't my time. It was not an exit point for me. So that's could be categorized as miraculous. Several things conspired to make it happen. Both spirit, my wonderful dog who was a guide of sorts anyway, all conspiring to get me up and out of there in that minute and a half, out of a sound sleep. So
what started the fire?
well, it was a desk that my cousin had moved, and there was a plug bar behind it, but it wasn't a 4-foot plug bar, it was a 6-foot, and she had looped it in the middle, and the desk had been sitting on it for 2.5 years. And it heated up, and finally arced. The fire inspector found it and showed it to me, showed me exactly where it had burned through.
Wow.
So,
wow.
And he said, I wouldn't have caught that unless you had moved the desk for some reason. So,
I'll share one from Milt, a miracle, what he considers to be a miracle, and I think it is too. But years ago, back in the early 2000s, he went to the doctor and they did EKG, and the doctor says, "You've had a heart attack." And Milt says, "No, I haven't." And he showed him the things. Yes, you've had a miracle. He wanted to put him on all these meds, high blood pressure meds. You've had a heart attack. Sent him to do all these tests, and Milt just absolutely refused to believe that diagnosis. And sure enough, he went for the echocardiogram and all that and all the tests come back, and it shows that he hadn't had a heart attack. And so Milt fully believes that his not accepting that diagnosis of that perspective of that doctor created that didn't happen. And sure enough, it didn't happen. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't there. So sometimes I think our will of not just falling into what the world is telling us who we should be or what's happening or what the diagnosis is, or that our sheer will of not believing that can create a miracle or a shift in our own journey. So I think that's a great example of Milt, believing. And I'm like you, Sally. I've had so many things happen that they're just like every day. Oh, wow, isn't that interesting?
mm-hmm.
But what's been going on as we've been talking, what's been going on in my head is thinking about how an act of a miracle happening is some type of communication from that unseen world interjecting itself into this 3D material world to make us realize there's something greater going on. And perhaps that miracle happening is to get our attention.
Yes, I agree with that.
To get us to focus that there's something going on in an unseen world that we can invite into this 3D world that will interact with us if we're open to it.
Well, and also, aren't we in that other world as well as in this one? So we're not disconnected from it.
Mm-hmm.
So just allowing these things to transpire. And I don't think we need to put the word miracle on all of them. Once again, it comes back to natural law of the universe.
It reminds me of Anita Moorjani's story, if you're familiar with her. She's a woman who was really on death's door and eaten up with cancer, and was told, by her family that, or told her family was told rather to be ready that it was imminent that she would pass. And then, I mean, you may have to correct me, Gary, I think she had a near-death experience. Good. Where she was told that she would go back and be completely healed. And it seemed miraculous for someone who was on death's door for cancer to basically be revived and healed completely of it.
The doctors were stunned because she had tumors throughout her body.
Yeah.
And they just started vanishing.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, of course, her life's work since then has been to tell her story. Right. And that's what she has done. She's written a book and she's been on podcast and she's told this story and helped to waken up much of the rest of the world to what reality it really is. Right? To the fact that these miraculous events not only happen, but they happen for us as well as through us. Mm-hmm. And so, the fact that she came back to do this work was why I will presume is why she experienced cancer to begin with. Mm-hmm. Just so that spirit could utilize her then in service of
And
helping the rest of the world to wake up.
and by her claims, it was partly due to the way she was in the world. One, she had a huge fear of death, and she was a people pleaser, but never taking care of herself. And that built over time, which, caused, she feels, the illness that she um, came down with. So how we live in the world is so important, you know. Um, it's a big part of it.
Yeah. So I think that this invitation to that unseen world to interact with us is very key. It doesn't have to be sometimes just help, you know. I don't know, and letting go of trying to figure it out, because so many of us humans are trying to control everything. And sometimes we have to let go of the control of what's happening and surrender into allowance. And just that invitation, I think, is so important to open the mind up just a little bit, that there might be something out there that loves me, even though I'm not perfect, even though I've made mistakes, even though I've made some bad choices in life, even though I've gone against my own inner guidance system and done things I shouldn't have done. And I think there's so many people out there that don't realize that they are so loved and accepted just as they are, and that this is a free will environment that we learn through those choices. And I think understanding that the divine itself, which exists in all things, does not judge those choices. It only loves. Which brings me to the question is, can our self-judgment, not seeing our own divinity, block those miracles from happening? Because it is the opposite of divine unconditional love, and which is where we all have to come to, is loving ourselves, warts and all, mistakes and all. Any thoughts on that?
I think so. I mean, I think we block it, like you said. Um, we're never going to be perfect living in a physical body. There are just things about it that doesn't quite reach perfection, but we can aspire to that, I think, and do our very best. But yes, I think we block it by not realizing there is this greater reality. I think we
Yeah.
absolutely have to come to a knowing that that is the case.
And in that blocking, we learn another lesson, right? I think we're perfect in our imperfection. We're even perfect in our illusion of separation, because we came here to be veiled. We didn't come here to have, at least initially, full access to the things that, we have greater access to, outside of this life. But we do come, I think, to remember, and the mistakes we make help us remember, right? We learn no matter what we do. We experience no matter what we do. So if we can just give ourselves a little bit of grace, a little bit of leeway for, forgiving ourselves when we make those mistakes, not beating ourselves up if we made a wrong choice, and just accept the learning that came from it, then I think those miracles are going to happen faster and easier and more freely. And we'll just accept that we are powerful, immense, creative beings at our core.
One of the things I was hearing while you were talking, Sally, was that Divine Spirit is always on our side. Always on our side. Never anti us, no matter where we are in our journey or how dark choices we've made and have become, and how in the lower emotions and feelings we're stuck in. Divine Spirit is always on our side and is waiting for us and giving us clues that it's there and that unconditional love is there, often through suffering moments. I would say often through life experiences that are hard, and it waits without judgment and giving you or each of us an opportunity to choose differently.
Right.
And that is a miracle in itself. That there never was that separation, Sally, like you were talking about, there never was the separation. It was in our own mind that we thought there was a separation, and in our own playing around in the lower vibrational pain and suffering feelings. And sometimes those are to drive us to that point where we say, you know what, I give up. I'm going to stop trying to control life, because usually pain and suffering is about resisting what's happening. And sometimes the miracle is choosing to not resist it anymore.
And I would say in all of our conversations that we've had over the months, that's the theme that keeps coming back, is just surrendering to the experience, surrendering, our desire to control, right? And then we bring it up again and again. Must be important.
Yeah. And once somebody has that one, if we call it a miracle, that one miracle that where somehow they allow themselves for that divine presence to reach in and touch them in one little way, then they go, oh, I didn't make that happen. I didn't control that. That happened on its own, whether it's through a dream or through a license plate in front of you, just little things like that. The universe is waiting, I think, and the signs are all around us, are waiting us to wake up to the signs that are there. A lot of people talk about, when you're sort of getting into alignment or you're where you're supposed to be, you see multiple numbers like 2222 or 1111 or 111 or 333. And it's the universe's I think there's a book called God Winks. Have you heard of that book?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where the divine winks at us and say, oh, we're still here. We're just waiting for you to acknowledge that there's something greater than yourself. And to me, that is the miracle of waking up out of the separation and thinking the only thing that exists is this 3D world. So I think, how can we help the listener, and hopefully what we've talked about so far, but is there anything that comes to you on helping the listener recognize that miracles are a natural state of being? Anything pop into your head?
I think one thing, and I said this before, and I'm going to reiterate because I think it's really critically important, is when we're asking, because the asking is an important part. But to cultivate the inner sense that it's your divine right and it has already transpired. So we're living as if the miracle, quote unquote, has transpired, and we are expressing gratitude for that. I'd say that's a baseline for operating in that field, in harmony with that field.
Sometimes could the answer for the miracle be wait?
Could be.
Sure. Or no, or any other number of answers. Sometimes, but that goes back to whether or not what we're asking for is driven by our ego or is driven, by our true selves, our soul selves, and it's sometimes hard to know the difference between those two things, right? Because we think of ourselves as being our ego probably 90% of the day, and it's only 10% of the day that we're actually tapping into, more of the core of who we are. But yeah, my biggest, I guess, recommendation for anyone wanting to understand miracles and maybe even experience them is just to, as much as possible, remain in a state of play with regard to how you're experiencing your life, and to release control. When children are, this is something that I've just been teaching in a class recently. When children are playing with crayons and making marks and creating images on a piece of paper, they're not judging it. They're not beating themselves up for it not looking a certain way, right? And we can beat ourselves up for our lives not looking a certain way. If instead we become more childlike and more playful and more exploratory and experimental, then these things arise naturally. These experiences just become a part of our everyday life. And that would be my recommendation.
And I have a great little story I'd like to just tell you real quickly. There was a little boy who was telling all his friends, I'm going to get this wonderful bicycle for Christmas because I've asked God for it. And they're all laughing at him, saying, God doesn't answer prayers. You're not going to get the bicycle. So, yes, I am. God always answers prayers. Christmas comes. He doesn't get the bicycle. The friends say, see, God didn't answer your prayers. And he said, yes, he did. He said no.
Very good.
So
Very
sometimes the answer is no.
Right. And then we have to not resist the no.
Right.
Because I think divine spirit knows what's best, knows us better than we know ourselves, and knows what's best for our journey. And sometimes I think we have to surrender into trust, instead of resistance, that our souls know why we came here, what we're supposed to do. And sometimes what we want isn't in alignment with that.
Right.
And so maybe staying in alignment with whatever needs to happen, whether it's mine to receive or not, I'm okay.
Somebody asked, I think it was Jay Krishnamurti, says, what makes you different from everyone else? And he said, I don't mind what happens. And that's from a lot of people can't grasp that, but that's from a higher perspective.
Not minding what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. And boy, do we as human beings sometimes mind what happens. And when then we throw our little hissy fits, and I like to use the word, I think it's a Southern word, conniption fit.
Yeah.
An inner conniption fit about how we didn't want this to happen and why did this happen. And then we judge ourselves for it happening because why did I create this, instead of being able, and this is what's coming to me, is in the midst of that difficulty, just saying, thank you. I don't know why this has come into my life, but thank you. I know that there's God and good in it somewhere. I can't see it yet, but I'm okay with it. And that's, I think, one of the hardest lessons in our spiritual journey is surrendering to what is happening and not resisting it, but go into gratitude. And maybe that's opening the door to a miracle when we surrender to what's happening.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
And life is happening for you, not to you.
Yes.
In which case, it's all a miracle.
Yes. Always is happening for you. Always. And I like that word always, because in all ways, life is happening for you, even the difficult things. And the miracle is in shifting the perspective about what is happening to say, how can I see God and good in this? So, well, cool. Well, why don't we leave it there? And hopefully people in the comments will share their stories of miracles. Would love to hear them. And thank you so much for joining us today. And this was a fun discussion, and we'll see how the miracles unfold in the future, right? All right. Bye-bye, everyone.